Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You're tuned in to the Infowars Nightly News. Tonight is Wednesday, February 6, 2013. We are live, and I'm your host, Aaron Dykes. Now, coming up later in the program, we have an interview with Jennifer Stahl, who was arrested over the smart meter matter for trying to refuse the installation. That's coming up on the other side with our reporter, Melissa Melton. But first up in the news, Kurt Nemo's article about cops manning random revenue enhancement checkpoints in Florida. They're no longer just restricting themselves to DIU checkpoints, checking drivers for sobriety, which is already unconstitutional in violation of the Fourth Amendment, presuming someone to be guilty until proven innocent. Now they're going to be pulling over vehicles at unconstitutional checkpoints, and in a very Nazi paper-please manner, they're going to be checking vehicles for worn tires, bad brakes, lighting defects, and other minor regulatory details on cars so they can issue tickets and collect revenue. And Kurt very much takes the tact of how they're bolstering the coffers of the state, adding millions of dollars to pay for expanding programs and all their pensions for their bureaucrats, all retiring en masse. But the point is, they're just moving further and further with the police state. I never liked the DUI checkpoints. They're clearly not okay with the Bill of Rights and Constitution. But there is a problem with drunk drivers, so at least they have the guise of trying to stop the emergency of the tens of thousands of deaths that happen on the highways each year. But with revenue collection checkpoints, minor things wrong on a car, they already have cops patrolling and pulling people over and issuing tickets for that. They don't need to presume everyone guilty and have a Stasi checkpoint like it's a banana republic. Very disgusting, not a good move, not a good sign, especially if other states follow suit. Really out of control. Meanwhile, in furtherance of this entire gun control agenda, the Demand a Plan group, the NBC 30 Rock Center actors, primarily from SNL and other comedy shows who are basically bought and paid for by people like Bill Gates and Rockefeller and Mayor Bloomberg, did a press conference today. Chris Rock spoke there and had some very disturbing things to say, saying that basically Obama is the country's boss and he's the dad of the country. No, the president works to serve the people of the country and is supposed to uphold the Constitution and Bill of Rights, although it's pretty clear the man in office is not even entitled to be in office and has no interest in upholding the Constitution. But just check out what he said in this press conference. Very strange. Of course, the comedian and actor Chris Rock. I'm just here to support the president of the United States, he said. The president is our boss. But he's also, you know, the president and the first lady are kind of like the mom and dad of the country. And when your dad says something, you listen. And if you don't, it can bite you in the ass later on. So I'm here to support the president. Let's go ahead and roll that clip. It's real strange. Collectivist rhetoric. Do we have that ready to go, guys? Let's go to it right now.
I am just here to support the President of the United States. The President of the United States is, you know, our boss, but he's also, you know, the President and the First Lady are kind of like the mom and the dad of the country. And when your dad says something, you listen. And when you don't, it usually bites you in the ass later on.
And that's an excerpt, but very bad idea right there. First of all, they consider all kinds of dictators, classically Joseph Stalin, to be the father of the country, and they all idolized him and painted him as, you know, with children and how he's leading the country single-handedly, taking care of things. We know that leads to a total loss of rights. It leads to democide. It leads to genocide, starvation, centralized control of almost anything. Not a good idea. But furthermore, shall not infringe hasn't changed since yesterday or the past several weeks that we've been standing up for the Second Amendment. Of course, standing up for it for a long time. But this whole idea of we've got to turn in the guns, guns are illegal, and the mayors and everybody's got to stand up. Well, the point is it's backfiring. We'll get more into that in a moment. But he also, of course, he's such a comedian. He also said every mass shooting is done by guys who live with their mom, who live in their mother's basement. So I believe you should have to have a mortgage to own a gun. And while that's just a joke, Chris Rock, we know they really are trying to restrict gun access, turn it into a privilege when it's clearly a right. not only for self-defense in the home, but to stave off would-be usurpers, would-be dictators, and tyranny in general. This whole nightmare bad joke thing. Let's go to his actual stand-up comedy on gun rights and what he calls the $5,000 bullet policy from some time ago. Do we have that clip, guys?
About gun control. Gotta get rid of the guns. Man, I like guns. You don't need no gun control. You know what you need? We need some bullet control. I think all bullets should cost $5,000. Because if a bullet costs $5,000, there'll be no more innocent bystanders.
Oh, it's another Hollywood hypocrite. He says he likes guns. He appears in dozens of movies firing weapons, playing up the celebrity aspect of just random fire, killing people in hostage situations, portraying heroes as people who go on killing sprees and evade the law. Then he wants to stand up and try to pimp for gun confiscation. Well, it's because he works for a bunch of gangsters in government. Really gross stuff. And even more gangster government than our quickly deteriorating United States of no rights is, of course, China. Now, their one-child policy has, according to their own statistics, prevented the birth of more than 400 million children. It's created a genocide, particularly of young girls, because of the preference for male children and the one-child policy. Millions upon millions upon millions of girls are aborted. They suffer infanticide, or they're lost into a system of sex trafficking and child slavery, all very wicked stuff. But now the actual one-child policy enforcers, which come from the National Family Planning Office, actually crushed a 13-month-old boy to death after the parents refused to pay the fine for having more than one child. So disgusting, should really upset us all. And again, hundreds of millions of children have been the victims of this awful policy under worldwide global eugenics enforced by the United Nations and at the state and national levels. But here is just that one case. You know, Joseph Stalin said one death is a tragedy, a million deaths is just a statistic. Well, here's the case of just one child, a boy physically crushed by a car. They said the parents got upset that they had to pay the fine, that they were found out, that they were being hassled, again, by these family planning enforcement police. And so, well, the police guy just decided he was going to crush the child because he's dehumanized, sees no value in human life, and actually gets paid bonuses for each child he prevents from being born or seizes from parents or gets fine money for or, you know, induces into infanticide. Yes, the family planning officials actually get bonuses for each kill count they have. I am opinionatedly calling it a kill count, but let's be honest, that's what it is. And already abortion is murder. This national policy is suicide, genocide, and murder, but particularly this crushing of the one 13-month-old boy is hardcore murder. And if this doesn't wake us up to the evils of the one-child policy, let's look at all the statements from the eugenicists who think it's so great that they are going to be in control of the earth and everyone else is scum and needs to die and stop reproducing until there's just 1 billion or 2 billion, depending on who you ask. But Jurian Mason, who wrote this article, cites, of course, John P. Holdren and Paul Ehrlich's eco-science plan for the planetary regime that would use food as a weapon to enforce national population limits and enforce them thusly. But he also talks about the United Nations enforcing it. Well, again, as I mentioned, the United Nations and the private foundations, the Rockefeller-controlled Population Center, the Bill Gates Foundation, the Ford Foundation, and so many others go to the individual countries, induce the countries to set up a national family planning office. And as I mentioned, then those workers get bonuses to go house to house to collect data and statistics and target families that have too many children, get them to get on birth control, get them to agree to abortions, or they'll just secretly sterilize you in camps if it's India, or they'll create this massive genocide as in China, as of course we've already talked about. Just discussing, they literally call the people they're seeking after targets. They literally call them targets. And It just goes on. But they want to extend the one-child policy because, of course, we know China is just the model. They want to take it to Africa, in particular Nigeria, because they have such a high birth rate. And they're really just promoting the idea that you should have to have a license to have a child, and that it's okay for a government entity to tell you who's going to be born. Well, we know it's probably going to destroy China. But look at the case from last year. If you guys could pull up the other tab next to that. They also steamrolled a man because he refused to give up his land that the Chinese government wanted to seize and give to a corporation. That's the kind of thing that goes on in China as well. So just so much draconian tyranny. We really have to pray that our country doesn't slip that far. We need to say no against this, expose what the United Nations and these private donor groups that are tax-free here in America are doing, so we can rein this in so it doesn't reach our shores and so we can stop killing people in other countries. Meanwhile, Luke Radowski at wearechange.org has done so much great work over the year. He's just thanklessly and tirelessly confronted people over and over again, and of course sought out stories there in New York, the great metropolis where so many things happen. He got an exclusive interview, really a touching piece, with Joe Lozito. This is a man who was taking the subway. He took it daily, like many New Yorkers, to his job or whatever it was he was doing on a day-to-day basis, and he was attacked by what turned out to be a serial killer. He was completely unarmed and stopped this man who was trying to stab and slice him to death. He had some nearly fatal wounds, and it was just shocking already just to be in that incident, of course, but all the more shocking when he found out later in court testimony and everything that the NYPD had witnessed the entire thing and were approximately 2 to 3 feet away from him behind a closed door, but refused to respond, refused to stop this killer as he attacked this subway passenger. I've excerpted just about a 4.5-minute clip of Luke's larger 13-minute piece, so please go to wearechange.org and watch that entire piece. But let's go now to this incredible encounter that just shows how far things have deteriorated and why the NYPD claims they don't have a duty to protect and serve you.
In New York City, where virtually any form of self-defense is illegal, we're told that the NYPD is here to protect us. Is that really the truth? Is the NYPD required by law to protect the citizens of New York?
Yes. That's what they're there for. Yes.
Yes, they do. They have to serve and protect.
My name is Joseph Lozito. On February 12, 2011, my life was changed forever. It happened on the subway. And I come right to this seat where I'm sitting right now. I sit down. It's a first seat in the first car. On the other side of this wall is the engineer of the train. After I sit down, 2 uniformed police officers enter the train the same door I did. They proceed to go right into the motorman's compartment through a door just like this. The next thing I know, a man comes up from the middle of the car. He comes to a door, starts banging on the door, bang, 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 looking through the window. And he says, "Let me in, I'm the police." And the police officer behind the door, looking through that window, looks at him and says, "You're not the police." With that, the gentleman turns around and walks back to the middle of the car. As soon as that gentleman left this area, another person that was standing right here next to me comes up here, frantically starts tapping on the window, alternately tapping and looking over his shoulder at the first man, trying to get the police attention, trying to get them to come out. And he's tapping on the window and he's waving, and he's tapping on the window and he's waving. Still no action. They don't come out. The first gentleman that tried to get in, the one who impersonated a police officer, stops 2 feet from me, maybe 3 feet from the store, looks at me, looks down at me, I look up at him. He takes out an 8-inch cooking knife, looks me dead in the eye and says, "You're gonna die, you're gonna die." And with that, he takes the knife and plunges it into my face. So he recoils his arm back for another plunge, and when he brings it back, I shot for his legs. And while I took him down, I was able to take him down. It gave him free rein for the back of my head. And while I was taking him down, he proceeded to stab me and slice me in the back of the head 3 separate times. Finally, the 3rd time he slices up, I'm able to catch his hand, I slam it down, he drops the knife. Right then and there is when I felt a tap on my shoulder, and it was the male cop that was in here, and he taps me on the shoulder and he says, okay, you can get up now, we got him. All the medical personnel is surrounding me. Police officer comes to the head of the bed that I'm on, and he shows me a mugshot, and he says, is this the guy that did this to you? And I said, yes. And he said, well, you're a hero. And I said, well, I'm not a hero, why am I a hero? He goes, well, he killed 4 people last night. They told me later that week I'm gonna have to testify before a grand jury. After you testified, Terrence Howell testified. And long story short, Terrence Howell basically said he was watching from the door through the window, and he was about to come out to stop Maxim Gelman, but when Gelman reached into his jacket, he thought he had a gun, so instead of coming out, he closed the door and stayed inside. And when he told me that, it was like being attacked all over again. You know, I was raised to respect the police, and when I found out that this whole thing could have been prevented, we were furious. I mean, what do you say to that? What do you say when there's 2 police officers less than 2 feet away from you, behind a door? They have guns, I have nothing. They have nightsticks, I have nothing. To me, the NYPD is a symbol of safety and security, and they're there to protect you. That's what I always thought it was. I always thought that's what the police were there for. And now I know, because of my case, the police don't have to do anything. So what they did that day, by staying in there and not coming out until I had control of Maxim Gelman, until I had disarmed them, in the eyes of the city of New York, in the eyes of the state of New York, is perfectly okay. And there's something wrong with that.
And again, ladies and gentlemen, this is a powerful piece up at wearechange.org, but it's a case example not only of a profile in courage and one man's incredible encounters, but also a profile in how everyone expects the police are going to protect them. But when it comes down to the incident, the police have been told that in a legal capacity, they have no duty to protect you. And so if you can't protect yourself, who will? Now, I don't know all the circumstances, so I'm not going to brand this cop a coward, but it certainly looks strange to me that he would completely stand down as a man is being potentially murdered with a knife when he's carrying a gun. And again, you hear the guy in the video talking about how he had nothing, yet because his life was on the line, wrestled this man until he had him overcome. The police had a gun, had a baton, but did nothing, just stood down. But why? Why can't New Yorkers defend themselves, carry weapons when they know there's criminals running rampant in a major city? It's a target-rich environment, so the criminals are only encouraged. But here's Bloomberg, here's the mayors of Chicago and all the major cities saying guns are illegal. We've got to ban them all. We've got to put all power in the hands of government, even though they're sworn not to protect you. Well, those officers and the military are also sworn to uphold the Constitution and Bill of Rights, and we're seeing a movement back towards that, thankfully. But we've got to turn the culture around, remind police that they are here to protect and serve the people of this country. Otherwise, why are we paying your salary, and why are you out there with the attitude like you're above the people? We need to have a general atmosphere of safety, and that comes through armed Americans, not through police state measures and more government power. Now, Mike Adams has written an op-ed at hisnaturalnews.com. It's up on Infowars.com, detailing how the post-Sandy Hook gun control push spectacularly backfired in America. Mike Adams writes in part that in the aftermath of the tragic Sandy Hook shooting, the push for gun control, however, spectacularly backfired. In reality, it has hardened the positions of gun rights advocates while massively increasing the number of AR-15s and other firearms sold across the country. The backfire is far worse than gun grabbers could have possibly imagined when they launched their efforts on the graves of the dead Sandy Hook children. Yeah, shame on you for exploiting the deaths of children and trying to psyop this entire country. But the lesson we've learned here is what Bill Clinton himself admitted, that there's a deep-set gun culture in this country. Yeah, because it's why this country was founded, and that it's very difficult to overcome them. But here's just a rundown of some of the effects of their over-the-top push for gun control in the wake of Sandy Hook, put together by Mike Adams. Number one, sales of guns reached record levels, almost completely sold out in many parts of the countries. You've seen the stories where lines outside of gun shows were around the block, 500 people just here in Austin, Texas. In Seattle, a gun buyback program turned into an impromptu private sale as people on the streets offered more cash than the cops were to buy guns from citizens. Of course, those were almost certainly law-abiding citizens. Criminals are always going to get guns. Why shouldn't law-abiding, responsible people have guns to keep a balance of power? That's what the founders always talked about. Furthermore, in the wake of Sandy Hook, the NRA membership spawned 300,000 new members just in the last couple months. Gun Owners of America saw a great surge in their membership. We've heard from the Hollywood hypocrites. It blew up in their face when that one listener from the Alex Jones show put together that powerful clip matching their phony demand a plan where they all act sympathetic against all the different movies they've been in where they spray bullets in every scene and mow down people with wanton glee. And then we've seen this great propaganda pushback where first Obama faked tears and stood on the backs of the children. Well, now he's having his White House propaganda arm put out photos of him with guns and basically agreeing to be in a Photoshop picture to look like he's sympathetic to guns so they can wait until they think the time is right to push for gun control again. And, of course, we saw the same thing with CNN's Piers Morgan. He came down to Katy, Texas, as we already told you earlier in this week, to fire automatic weapons and other AR-15s and guns and stuff at the gun range here in Katy. And so, really, they're just lining up wanting to be pictured with guns. And so Mike Adams writes, how big a deal is all this? It's huge. Imagine, just imagine Piers Morgan picking up an AR-15 the day after the Sandy Hook shooting. Never would have happened. So why is he doing it now? It's because he's had himself chewed out. He's had himself beat up through words and through arguments from defenders of the Second Amendment, of course, including Alex Jones and so many others. Now, furthermore, this has caused Americans in general to break their silence and speak up and defend the Second Amendment and say, no, we don't want to go along with this. Secondarily, it's caused a reawakening, a rediscovering of what the Second Amendment is and why it was put in place, why it was in the Bill of Rights. If you've never looked into American history, first of all, it's incredible and full of detail. It's a lot more than you heard in your high school and middle school classrooms. But furthermore, the entire Bill of Rights was its own struggle after the Revolutionary War, after the Constitution was agreed upon, but before it was ratified, because many founders said there weren't enough protections against government, to restrain government. So they wanted to outline and guarantee the right of free press, of religion, and the right to keep and bear arms, and of due process, and of the right to privacy, and to not be searched without warrant and without witnesses. That's all in there for a reason, and it's a don't do list for government. It's a fairly short list of things they're specifically not to do, and government, of course, wants to violate every single one of them. But that's not it for Sandy Hook. This has reawakened the police, the law enforcement, and the sheriffs. You've seen this new movement where at least 230 sheriffs, probably more by this week because they're coming in by the hour, by the day, have not only said they're not going to go along with gun confiscation and new laws against the Second Amendment, they're saying they're going to kick the feds out, kick anyone from the state out if they're there to try to violate the Second Amendment. They're encouraging their citizens to buy guns, arm themselves, because the police and sheriffs can't and won't protect you. As we just saw in that clip, don't consider themselves to have a duty to protect you, so you better protect yourself. And furthermore, states themselves are rediscovering states' rights, many states introducing firearms protection acts or similar legislation, again, putting the feds on notice they're not going to be part of violating the Second Amendment. We have to keep standing up for this because they're going to keep pushing. They'll seize upon the next tragedy if and when it happens, probably only a matter of time. Let's just remember the Second Amendment is timeless, not to be infringed, shall not infringe. That's an order. And speaking of order, the soldiers, the military, of course, part of this component, and they also have spoken out in large numbers, active duty, retired, you name it, saying they will never be part of confiscating guns from Americans. They won't fire on Americans who aren't going to register or turn in guns, and basically just stop it. And that's the message we need to hear. Of course, we've seen pushback against New York Governor Andrew Cuomo and everyone else in between. And, you know, so let's stay vigilant for what they're going to do after the next tragedy. But let's also celebrate the fact that their brazen push to violate our basic rights has has reawoken a large portion of the country, and we can use that. We can mobilize that to continue to inform people and try to restore our republic, our Bill of Rights, and reinstore the great country we once had, which, of course, was never perfect. Now, we're going to go to what I consider to be one of my favorite reports. It was the first public meeting of the Oath Keepers on April 19th, 2009. We all traveled to just outside of Boston, Massachusetts, to Lexington, to Concord, where the first battle of the American Revolution began. And it's an excellent piece just reminding us about what the Second Amendment is about what this country is about, and about what it means when people say, no, they're not going to be pushed any further. And of course, Lexington was started specifically over disarmament of weapons. They went to seize the gunpowder stash and many of the weapons held by the militia there. This, of course, followed the debasing of the currency, outlawing the colonial script. It followed the British imposing a standing army on colonial Americans in the wake of the French and Indian War, supposedly to repel Indian attacks, but increasingly to patrol and keep in line the American colonists as they became more and more angry about the taxation, the lack of representation, and all the other factors going on. But again, it was disarmament that actually sparked the beginning of the revolution, and the feds better back off. We don't want a violent revolution, but people aren't going to put up with being disarmed. And with that, I take you to this powerful special report. We'll be back in just a few minutes here. Please share this with everyone you know. Let's get this broadcast out, and let's reawaken, let's revitalize the Constitution and Bill of Rights.
When you entrust a man with a public trust, and you know that he's human, and you don't want him to run amok, you bind him down with an oath. I know we heard talk today about someday you may see those in the uniform, in violation of their oaths, pointing the gun at you, their masters, in an unlawful way. I pray that never happens. It has happened. I want to assure you, the man in the uniform will not be I.
Today, really, in many respects, our government is the one that is stepping aside the rule of law.
Gun confiscation is exactly what happened during the state of emergency following Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans.
The social controllers are very scared of police and military rediscovering their oath of office.
We will not obey orders to impose martial law.
I will not obey.
They understand that throughout history, tyranny comes to your door in a uniform.
We will not obey orders to conduct warrantless searches of the American people.
I will not obey.
Think of every instance you can think in history where republics have fallen through usurpation of power. Particularly think of the times when it has happened through the military force run amok.
You can't really tell from my name, but my father lived under Stalin, and his whole family was killed by Stalin. And my mother's family escaped from North Korea, and they lost all their property, and were supposed to be killed at least 3 or 4 times. So I was fortunate to be born in this great nation, and but yet I see the same signs or our country going in the direction in which my parents escaped from.
U.S. troops also arrived, something far easier to do even now thanks to last year's elimination of the 1878 Posse Comitatus Act. That forbid U.S. troops from policing on American soil.
We will not obey any orders to force American citizens into any form of detention camps under any pretext.
I will not obey.
To what degree are we any more mindful of oaths?
If we had law enforcement in America keeping their oath to do just that, we would have our constitutional republic back tomorrow. That's how powerful this movement is.
I'm Garrett Lear, the Patriot Pastor.
This is where the battle was fought, right here in the Lexington Battle Green. This is sacred ground. This is one of the most important pieces of real estate in the history of America. This is where it happened, and this was the shot basically heard around the world, and still being heard around the world, I think.
I grew up in the town of Lexington, standing on the green, playing on the green. When I was a boy growing up, my mother told me about our ancestry, and so I started to go on the village green in Lexington, but didn't pay a whole lot of attention except to the statue of John Parker. Everyone could look up to him because he wasn't white, he wasn't brown, he wasn't red, he wasn't yellow, he wasn't black, he's green, actually. So anyone could identify with him, and I said, one day when I grow up, I want to be like him.
Welcome to Lexington, the cradle of American liberty.
Most people don't know really what happened at the Battle of Lexington, but basically what happened was the night before the battle, that would have been April 18th, riders came in, that's the midnight ride of Paul Revere. It was actually John Dawes that did it, and a man named Prescott, because Paul Revere was interdicted by the British troops. But they were bringing a message from Dr. Warren and the committees of correspondence and the committees of safety in Boston to tell them, looks like the British are mounted troops here, and we're not exactly sure what they're trying to do. They're probably going to go after the munitions that are in Concord, but they're probably going to try to capture Samuel Adams and John Hancock and either send them back to England in chains or shoot them right there or something. And basically when the British came, it was obvious that they had some bad plan. The Minutemen, the militia, the regulated militia, did not want to engage the British troops in a fight.
And so these men stood their ground when they were told, you are to drop your weapons and disband.
Lay down your arms, you damn rebels! It ain't. Disperse, I say!
Well, they started to disband, but they would not drop their weapons because they were militia. And what happened when they started to disband, they got fired on. The first shot that was fired by the British regulars. It was not fired by the Minutemen. It was not fired by the colonists. It was not fired by the people of Lexington. And we can find that in the narrative of Jonas Clark, the pastor. 8 of them got shot and killed. Many were bayoneted. Some died later of wounds. Many were wounded. But 8 died on this green. But they stopped the British as they were on their march to Concord. And they did what was right. This was a principled stand for freedom, and we're doing the same thing today.
We will not obey orders to disarm the American people.
I will not obey.
Well, today we're here on the green at Lexington, April 19th, which is the anniversary of April 19, 1775, which was the first shot and fired the American Revolution. I'm Stuart Rhodes, the founder of Oath Keepers, which is a nonpartisan association of current serving military, police, and veterans, all of us who swore an oath to defend the Constitution. And our mission is to make sure that all of the other oath takers are oath keepers.
Gun confiscation is exactly what happened during the state of emergency following Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. U.S. troops also arrived, something far easier to do even now thanks to last year's elimination of the 1878 Posse Comitatus Act. That forbid U.S. troops from policing on American soil.
We've had critics that say, well, what are you guys talking about? Of course I'm going to keep my oath. I find it offensive that you'd even suggest that a military officer or a police officer would not keep the oath. And we say, hey, we got one word for you, Katrina, okay? Look at what happened there. And so we want to make sure there are no more Katrinas. We don't want any more of that. What we're hearing is that a lot of those guys just weren't prepared for those orders and hadn't thought about it ahead of time. Then we have Lieutenant Commander Cunningham, Guy Cunningham, who was the author of the 29 Palms survey that was done back in 1995. Well, he surveyed the Marine Corps, some Marines at 29 Palms, and asked them whether or not they would fire on Americans who resisted in an attempt to disarm them. If orders came down to disarm the American people and they resisted, would they fire on them?
The 29 Palms survey, ending with question 46, with the scenario that the government has banned all non-sporting firearms and that the American citizens in possession of these firearms have 30 days to turn them over to the local authorities. At the end of this period of time, several citizen groups form that refuse or resist the confiscation of these firearms banned by the U.S. government. Marines were asked whether or not they would fire upon U.S. citizens who refuse or resist the confiscation of firearms banned by the U.S. government. And I found this very difficult to swallow. 11% opted with the no opinion response. Had no opinion? Firing on their own fellow Americans? Of the remaining 26.34% answered that they would fire on their fellow Americans, U.S. citizens, who refused or resisted the confiscation of firearms banned by the U.S. government, who had no authority constitutionally to enact such a ban. Because of the quotation March 11th, 1993 by President Clinton, because of the Clinton assault weapons ban that was being enacted, I formed a scenario that I knew would be explosive, shouldn't have been, but because of the times and the machinations of certain forces to disarm the American people.
I don't care whether it's your governor or your senator or your representative or your president. I'm sure you can look at instances, days within having sworn his oath, the person violates it blatantly. That's a dangerous thing.
I, George Walker Bush, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
And will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
None of this stuff would be happening if it had stuck with the Constitution and stuck within its parameters.
And we learned the American dream, and we were out there doing that American dream and working, and we were electing representatives that we felt were going to represent us while we were doing other things and maintaining our families and raising our families and doing the right thing as we thought. And I think we were duped in some cases where they've actually let us down.
I saw a tremendous pattern of the growth of the infrastructure of a totalitarian state in the last 8 years post 9/11. I mean, it's been going on for decades. We've seen for decades encroachments on our liberties, and then a crisis would come along, and then all of a sudden they had a chance to get their policies passed they've been wanting to pass for a long time. That's what I saw as just incredibly alarming. And it's just the concept of enemy combatant status itself is an extension of that. And when I was writing at Yale, I wrote a paper on enemy combatant status. It won their award for best paper on the Bill of Rights. And unfortunately, when Obama was elected, he didn't repeal any of those things. And he's left that in place, which is the pattern of all presidents. Whether it's a left boot or a right boot on the back of your neck, we just don't want the boot on the back of our neck.
He stands on that office on the condition of that oath, and the safety valve that he takes is refusing to violate it.
When you swore an oath to defend the Constitution, you took upon yourself an individual obligation to make your own decision on the spot of where that line is and whether an order is lawful or unlawful. You have an obligation to do so, and as the Nazis found out at Nuremberg, just following orders is no excuse.
95% of the church, Christian church, supported Hitler, which is terrifying to me. And so I think we need to really wake up and not assume that our fellow citizens won't hurt us.
I would say to any pastor or anyone in the military, should we have a breakdown in things in this country, stay by your Bible and stay by the Constitution. Do those things. And remember that in the history of this world, the terrible debacle, from my perspective anyway, of what happened in Nazi Germany, when the church did not stand by those innocent people, the Jewish people who were exterminated for no other reason than being Jewish.
My God, how did we ever allow our government to reach such a point?
What's happening to the United States is very, very sad. It's sad because we've seen it done to third world nations over and over and over again.
I would like to ask that all of you just take a moment, take a deep breath, and realize the solemn nature of this occasion, because those of you who so choose will be swearing an oath. Pretty serious proposition.
You'll never have anything in your life that's as valuable as your word. So just remember that. If we all do nothing more than fulfill our oath, then we can turn things around just on that alone.
Because it only takes a few relatively faithful servants to diffuse a lot of mischief in times of crisis, if they merely hold to their oath.
If you can't swear that oath, please mentally excuse yourself and don't participate, because I, for one, intend to honor this oath, because we're in perilous times. Not quite so perilous, or perhaps far more perilous than in 1775. Please raise your hand thusly, and when you hear me say "I," pronounce your own name. I, Larry Bailey, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States, against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same. That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same. That I take this obligation freely. That I take this obligation freely. Without any mental reservation. Without any mental reservation. Or purpose of evasion. Or purpose of evasion. Pledging my life. My fortune, and my sacred honor. So help me God. Welcome, my brothers and sisters, to our great fraternity.
Oath Keepers, an association of active duty military, police officers, and veterans, all of us who swore the oath, and will keep our oath, and will honor our oath. If you swore an oath to defend the Constitution, honor your oath by joining us, the Oath Keepers, and become an Oath Keeper.
We're ready for the oath, sir.
Raise your right hand and repeat after me the oath of enlistment. I, do solemnly swear or affirm.
Do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
And again, ladies and gentlemen, all governments become out of control, evil in that respect. All men are flawed and wicked in their own ways. The founders were very excellent men, but the triumph of the revolution was the extent to which they did not usurp powers. George Washington could have been king and was invited to, at least by some, but refused to. They used the Bill of Rights to restrain government. That's the importance of the oath, to keep balanced powers, to keep any one man from having too much power, because we know that power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. As Lord Acton said, that may as well be our quote for the day. We're going to be back after this with Jennifer Stahl on the smart meters issue. She'll be interviewed by Melissa Melton about how it's a spy tech technology in the house. That's coming up on the other side. Thanks for watching the Infowars Nightly News. Subscribe and share this powerful broadcast at prisonplanet.tv. Go to planetinfowars.com and start your own Infowar, and let's win back the hearts and minds of this country. It's going to be a culture war and info war. That's the way we're going to win things. Good night, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be back again tomorrow.
If you are receiving this transmission, you are the resistance.
Fellow freedom lovers, Alex Jones here with the biggest contest announcement we've ever made. This is so incredibly exciting. We are launching Operation Paul Revere. What did Paul Revere do? He rode through the countryside in New England saying, to arms, the redcoats are coming. Oneth by land, doeth by sea. And all that evil men and tyrants need to flourish is that good men and women do nothing. Let me officially announce Operation Paul Revere, a $100,000 cash first place winner to be judged by yours truly, Alex Jones. The film can be 3 minutes. It can be up to 2 hours. It can be fiction, nonfiction, documentary, drama. It's got to promote liberty and freedom and expose tyranny and oppression. And it's not just people in the U.S. that can enter. It's folks worldwide. The rules, the details are at Infowars.com/contest. You have to read the rules and officially sign up for this, because it's a $100,000 prize, first place, $10,000 second place, $5,000 third place. But just as I did last year with the reporter contest, we are going to crowdsource from the pool of incredible talent out there and hire several official crews to be directors and writers and camera people in Infowars.com produced major films and documentaries that will be put in movie theaters and on cable, and I've got all the connections to get it done. Together, we're going to really give the New World Order hell. This is extremely exciting. I've made over 20 films. One of them alone has reached more than 40 million people on YouTube and Google Video. The Obama Deception, Endgame, Fall of the Republic, Road to Tyranny. Films are the most effective thing I do, but they're very time-consuming. And so I want to turn the power of we the people loose here. And your art, your research, your ideas are unstoppable. We're officially kicking the contest off this Friday. And you've got a little more than 3 months until April 30th. Just a little more than 3 months to produce your documentary or your film and get it out. And it will absolutely reach tens of millions of people. Our normal contests get about 500 entries. That's what $10,000 prizes. This is 10 times that. 100,000 for first place. That's one of the biggest contests out there. In fact, it's the biggest next to Doritos that has $100,000. This is huge, ladies and gentlemen. $115,000 in cash prizes and a shot to have your film produced and financed by Infowars.com. Edit it, upload it to YouTube and one other alternate public video site, and send your entry to Paul Revere at Infowars.com. The animating contest of liberty that Thomas Jefferson talked about is happening right now. The modern battlefield is in the mind more than ever. We use truth. The globalists use lies and deception. The corruption and oppression and high-tech police state is in our face. But the controllers are scared. They intended to use the internet to dominate and control humanity and surveil us. But we've turned their system against them. This is a historic crossroads that we have reached. And I ask you to ride in the year 2013, just as one of the founders of this republic did back in 1775. I'm calling you to arms in the info war because the pen and the video camera is mightier than the sword. Let's go in there and rescue humanity and awaken them and set brush fires in the minds of men and women everywhere. Be part of this contest. You've got 3 months. Put your hat in the ring. Be part of the solution to the corruption and oppression. Be part of the resistance to tyranny. We're looking for the Paul Reveres that will drive a stake through the New World Order's wicked heart. ProPure is introducing Pro One. All of your filtration in one system, portable, on the go. This is the Pro One by ProPure. You wanted it, you got it. No more do you have 2 or 3 filters to just reduce sodium fluoride. You have a system that cuts out the sodium fluoride and up to 95% of hydrofluorosilicic acid. Advanced manufacturing technology combines silver-impregnated white ceramic with new Aquamedics advanced media for removal of fluoride and other heavy metals, all in one filter element. It cuts out the acid derivative of fluoride. It is the only one that does it, and out of the gates, we have it discounted at 10% off with promo code WATER. This is the only system that in one unit helps reduce or remove pesticides, herbicides, chloramines, ammonia, and chlorine, hydrofluorosilicic acid, the most common form of fluoride not covered by other fluoride filter brands, and sodium hexafluorosilicate. This is a revolution against the tyrants. They love putting the toxic acid base of fluoride into your water. They love the fact that it's an adjuvant supercharging the trace Prozac in the water and the hormones and the other chemicals. By cutting out fluoride, you cut out the turbocharger in all the poison being artificially introduced into your body. This is what I use. It's a win-win. You get a high-quality product at the lowest price. You support the InfoWar. Get your ProPure with the new Pro One filter today at InfoWarsStore.com or by calling 888-253-3139. Alex Jones here with a message that could revolutionize health in this country. Going back about 1.5 years ago, I began to learn about the incredible health effects of longevity products. Dykes lost 92 pounds. We're going to show you some before and afters. Break down what happened, your story.
I've worked really hard with diet and exercise to try to lose weight, but I just didn't get the results. It just didn't happen. Then I saw what you were doing with InfoWarsTeam.com. I wasn't even trying to lose weight, but I got it because I wanted to feel better energy. I wanted that nutrition. Didn't even understand how that could kickstart my own weight loss goals, but the products did that for me. I found myself suddenly losing weight, more energetic, wanting to exercise, wanting to eat the right foods.
And they don't even advertise it as weight loss. I want to challenge our radio listeners to go to InfoWarsTeam.com. Sign up as a distributor and get wholesale pricing discounts at InfoWarsTeam.com.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Melissa Melton here, and I'm getting ready to talk to Jennifer Stahl of Naperville Smart Meter Awareness, who was recently arrested just for resisting forcibly having a smart meter put on her home. Well, thank you, Jennifer. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so briefly tell us what happened. The city is installing smart meters, and some people, that's against some people's will, so they show up with cops to force their way to do it, and you guys dared to not only exercise your rights and resist, but you filmed the police?
Yeah, well, I had gotten a call from my husband that they had arrived to install the meter, and we'd previously refused, and we came, and earlier in the day we had been interviewed by CBS, and they were still with, so they followed CBS to Chicago, followed along, so a reporter and her camera woman were there, and she filmed while the police came and interacted with me. And then my friend and colleague Kim Bendis, who's our president, was also standing there, and she had on video, her little video camera, and she was videotaping the conversation, and the police officer told his officers to, the sergeant told his officers to arrest her. And so—
For filming?
For filming the police officer talking to me about wanting to install the meter.
So she's going to get arrested for filming while a news crew is filming you guys while she's filming?
Yes.
And so how does that work?
I'm not a lawyer and I'm not an attorney, but my understanding is that everybody has a right to be, if you're allowed to be on private property, that you can film anybody. And so, again, I don't know 100% what the laws are, and obviously her attorney will be working to figure out how he can get the charges dropped against her.
So then they arrested her for eavesdropping.
Yes.
At that time?
Yes.
And then what happened with you?
Well, while that was going on, I had proceeded to my backyard, and I told them that I was refusing, that I didn't consent to the smart meter, that I was going to keep my analog meter, and that I had informed the city in writing that I was refusing, and the officer told the city installers to go ahead and cut the lock, which they did, and that's all on camera. And then they moved into the backyard, and I went and stood in front of in front of my analog electric meter and said, "I'm refusing," and the officer arrested me.
Wow. Well, were you aware that last year, actually, the Supreme Court ruled that the eavesdropping laws, even in Illinois, where they're some of the most harsh laws we have, were actually ruled a violation of the First Amendment to have those rules in place?
I was not aware of it. Of course, a lot of people came out of the woodwork after this incident occurred and said, that was completely unjustified. But again, I guess that the judge will make a decision on that, whether or not she was really guilty of doing anything wrong.
I mean, the Supreme Court is ruling this, and Illinois is just doing it anyway. Well, let's actually break down some of the smart meter information and the health issues, because these meters have actually been linked to heart problems, headaches, insomnia, ringing in the ears, DNA breakdown, I've actually read. And here's a take, see if you can follow this. This is a take from an electrical engineer named Rob States, and he says that he's been doing his own research on this, and he says extensive measurements have demonstrated that all of the meters measured so far, including ABB, GE, Landis-Gyr, emit noise on the customer's electric wiring in the form of high-frequency voltage spikes, typically with an amplitude of 2 volts, but a frequency anywhere from 4,000 hertz to 60,000 hertz. And he goes on to talk about how it's based on what the customer has plugged in. So they can't even really gauge how bad it's going to be, because based on what you have plugged into your house, the emission of the frequency waves could be super high.
Yes. Yeah, Rob States has done, I know he's been working on it. I've talked with him before, and his work and research into why these meters are making people sick is phenomenal. And I'm really hoping that he can have a lot of great documentation that we can use in our federal lawsuit to show that this is truly is a harmful situation. When you think of it from I'm not an engineer, but he is, but he's very good at explaining it in a way that anybody can understand. And when you really think about when you put a digital meter, which has a switching power supply inside of it, it's a little microcomputer. It has an analog meter just has old-fashioned dials, like an old clock goes around and around. This one with its digital power supply and switching back and forth to record and then to transmit it wirelessly with this burst of radio frequency on top of it. You actually think about it, it's connected right on top of your power supply, which goes right into your house, into your electrical panel, which feeds your entire home. That basically makes that whole network of all those circuits going through your house, it basically makes your house light up as like a giant antenna, and it conducts the dirty electricity, the transients, the high voltage,
And we're just being bathed in that all the time.
Yes, and that's why some people who basically are allergic to that have reported that the day that went on their house, that they started to feel these symptoms. Some people will feel like all those symptoms you described are probably the most common symptoms that people experience, including things up to just a numbness or burning sensation on their face or their arms or their body. Some people suffer from the tinnitus is very common. They hear this buzzing or ringing in their ears. Even people in Naperville are reporting problems and reported problems to the city the day that these meters went on or close to it, if not right away, that they're suffering from problems. And we also have been receiving, I have at least one report for sure to our group that somebody who got a non-wireless meter, which is still digital, it's still a smart meter, still violates your privacy, that he himself was suffering from problems even though it wasn't a wireless. So it's even the digital meters. That's why we've been advocating in our organization in Naperville, is for advocating that everybody has a right to have an analog meter, and the city refuses to respond to that.
It's actually just amazing. And it actually goes further than just the symptoms we're seeing here in the short term, because we haven't seen these smart meters in a long-term situation yet. But I was just doing some research on this today, and apparently a retired Canadian Armed Forces captain had come out to say that he was involved in Russian experiments with U.S. embassy staff after World War II, and they unknowingly did these tests on the staff where they would bombard them with EMF 6 to 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. And it was actually less power level than what we're using here, because it was in Russia, so it was 1/100th of what we have here. But he said that between 53 and 76, 2 U.S. ambassadors died of cancer, 1 developed leukemia and eventually died from it, 16 women got breast cancer, and many others had immune system disorders, high white blood cell counts, chronic fatigue, muscle aches, and that is on record, and they didn't tell these people they were doing this. And that's 1/100th of the power we're using here.
Our government knew that was going on as well, which is astonishing that they allowed this experiment. It's essentially experiment to continue.
Yeah, so they're well aware. And the World Health Organization, I mean, they even came out in 2011 and said the wireless power that's coming off, the wireless radiation coming off these meters is a possible carcinogen. They even admitted that. And so to go on with this, it's like, how can they ignore the idea that being bathed in radiation basically all day is not a good thing?
Yes,
it blows my mind. It just
it is amazing, yes. But there are other groups that will fund a study that's funded by the wireless industry or funded by the power industry, the Department of Energy, or I don't know. It's quote unquote the advocacy group for these meters, saying how great they are. They're the ones that are funding the studies so that the outcome really looks in their favor, and that's the studies that they use. And that's the excuse that the city of Naperville has used. Well, we've got our studies, and you've got your studies, and we just choose to believe our studies.
Because they're not funded by lobbyists. Well, so what happens if you try to go dark in protest of this?
You mean if I were to choose to...
Like if you were to just turn off the lights and say, I'm just not going to participate in this?
Are you saying, so if I choose to go without power?
Exactly.
Yeah, actually some people who were tried to explain that to the city, and they've told them I don't want you to install the meter. I want you to cut off my power, and I'll go without power. And they said, oh, well, we can't do that because it's below a certain temperature here, and there is a state law about not being able to shut off power, except that I think that the spirit of that law is for people that are deadbeat ratepayers that don't pay their bills. And so they've been, they can't, that the power companies can't shut them off. But these people are actually all paid up, and they're not deadbeat ratepayers. They actually, because they're so opposed to the meters, are willing to go off the grid, and the city is denying them. That's what I reported.
Wow. Well, I know we've reported on a case of a woman in Nevada who actually they put a smart meter on her bedroom wall, and she immediately started having health problems, and she replaced it with an analog meter on her own. She had an electrician come out, try to do it herself. And then she tried to go and turn in her smart meter to them. They would not accept it. And several days later, they actually sent armed the people from the energy company came, and they were armed. So they weren't even with cops. They themselves were armed, according to reports, and showed up at her house and took both meters, the one she paid for to put in and their meter, left her without power, and she's been without power for months now. They won't let her have...
It's astonishing that this is even happening in this...
It's amazing.
Over a meter, is it really that critical that every single person have one of these meters? It just doesn't even make sense. And here in Naperville, we're a municipal-owned utility, so the city owns the utility, and the city instructs the police. So we're kind of stuck in between a rock and a hard place and a vicious cycle of what do we do? We have nobody else to go to, which is why our group and our nonprofit that we started 2 years ago, Naperville Smart Meter Awareness, we filed a federal lawsuit based on the fact that these meters violate our constitutional rights and our property rights.
Oh, good.
That's why we have a federal lawsuit. And it's active. It's been going on for 13 months. For almost 14 months now. It's still active. It's in the discovery phase, and the judge hasn't made any decision on the motion for preliminary injunction, which was filed last May. So we're still waiting for action on that part because we have nobody else to go to.
Exactly. I mean, it's just amazing. It's not just a health issue. Obviously, as you mentioned, there are wireless transmitters in these meters, and so it becomes a civil liberties privacy issue as well. I mean, we have smart tech in our appliances now. That's on record. We have smart tech here in the meters, even the new CFL light bulbs that are supposed to be so good for the environment, which also bathe you in very high levels of this radiation, have an FCC sticker on them. So they're communicating. I mean, pretty soon we're just going to live in this technocratic police state grid where there is no such thing as privacy anymore.
Exactly. The CFLs, we used to use those because we're very conservative in our energy usage in our house. And we used to have some of those, and then you have a few little mishaps with little kids who trip up the wire on a light, and sure enough, it falls on the floor. And we had twice that happen.
Oh, and the mercury in it.
Well, and the mercury it didn't break, but we were so upset and worried. And then, and to top it all off, we're very conscious and we're careful. We recycle. I recycle as much stuff as I do throw it in the garbage. I'm very conservative that way. And we take care of proper disposal of a CFL, but who else is doing that? Is everybody doing that? Because if they don't, it goes into a landfill and then it ends up in the water supply.
Oh, yeah, I don't think people even realize that there's a huge list of instructions you have to go down just to properly dispose of one of these new good for the environment light bulbs. It's ridiculous.
Well, and speaking along that line, too, from a health, off track here, but people have also suffered a similar type of a burn or a radiation type burn by sitting next to these. You can find videos online where people testify, that they've sat down in their favorite lamp, and then next to the lamp, the light's shining on them, and the next morning they wake up and they're just beet red, and suck. It's actually a radiation burn, like you've been discussing about how powerful the EMFs are that are delivered from these CFL bulbs. And there are other people who discuss how they've changed them all out and they start to feel sick, and they say, well, the only thing that changed was the light bulbs, so they changed the light bulbs back and they're fine. So there's clearly something that people are biologically, obviously we're all very different. I mean, my fingerprint doesn't look like anybody else's fingerprint, so my biology is going to be completely different than anybody else's, and them putting that meter on my house puts me and my whole family at risk because it's Russian roulette. I have no idea if that meter is going to affect me and my family or one of my family members like it has affected many, many thousands of other people already in the country.
Well, and they have no idea either, obviously, if it's on record that depending on what you have plugged in, what kind of electronics you're using in your home, that level of radiation there's a wide degree there of what you could be getting, and so they don't even know that, and the people who are using it don't in their homes, they don't have any idea. So I think we're going to see some pretty high instances of cancer-related issues. I mean, you're sitting around in your house, you've got the smart meters, you've got all these CFL light bulbs. I mean, personal story, my mother had a small home, and she replaced all of her light bulbs with those light bulbs as soon as they came out, because that was the right thing to do or whatever. And within a year, she had developed non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Oh. And I mean, obviously there are lots of environmental factors at play, yes. But I mean, you're sitting around in your home bathed in radiation for hours every night with your lights on, and if all of your lights are emitting thousands of these electromagnetic radiation all night long, I mean, over a year, just imagine what that's going to do to people. And then people wonder why cancer is skyrocketing. I mean, people are worried about cell phones, right, causing brain cancer and everything. But now we're going to have a huge meter. It's going to cover our house. We're going to have, these light bulbs everywhere. I mean, it's phenomenal that they can then go and get the police to come and force you to subject yourself to radiation. Exactly. It doesn't make any sense. And we've very politely and very carefully explained this all to the city council, who had authorized this. The city council is the board of directors in Naperville over the electric utility, and they had to authorize it. Yes, they were going to, go for this grant, and I'm sorry, they got a grant, $11 million matching grant for their $22 million project from the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. Nice. And so obviously it was hurry up, because of course the DOE says you have to do this within a certain period of time. And so they had to hurry up and scramble and get these people to come in and hire these consultants to the tune of over $5 million, who, we'll put in your smart grid for you, and they've never done that before. And they come forward, and people came out of the woodwork and said, hey, you know what? This is a privacy violation, and hey, did you hear people are getting sick, and this isn't the right thing to do, and most of them just started, they just backpedaled, and whether they knew about it or not, I don't really know. But when we brought it forward, and they say, they just dismiss you, and they say, well, no, that's not true. I was like, well, yeah, it is. And what's so wrong with people being able to just say no? And really, because we have to have all the data. We must have all the data, because we're going to reduce the amount of carbon emissions by reducing the amount of have to generate. And this is all for a greener reason. I said, but then you're robbing from Peter to pay Paul. You're gonna force a meter that may cause some people to be sick that they didn't even know that they were sick to this sort of thing. And for some reason, this one is very different. And I think it has to do with what Rob Statesville talks about with the electromagnetic fields that come across the wiring and the vibrations that come across from the meters. And when you have that new information, it just seems like they could have taken a step back, and they could have. They had the right to go back to the Department of Energy and ask for a 1-year extension, and they refused to do it. So they've really dug their heels in here. We tried to get a referendum on the ballot. It was a non-binding advisory referendum that we collected 4,200 signatures. One of the city councilmen was the only person to actually request a copy of those signatures. And then he and some army went through each one of them line by line and went up against some sort of voter registration database to determine what they thought were signatures. Well, they don't even do that when people are actually voting. So it's pretty interesting they would do that in your case. Yeah, isn't it? And that is ridiculous. And getting it cut off the ballot, because the electoral board, who had to hear the objection to the petition, was made up of all city staff and elected officials. So now you've got a big problem on your hands. It's like, I can't even get an advisory, and again, mind you, an advisory, non-binding advisory referendum is an opinion poll. It'd basically be a question on the ballot that people could ask and say, do you want to stop the smart meter project, yes or no? And they can take the information and then say, if people overwhelmingly said, yes, I want you to stop, they didn't even have to do anything about it. Yeah, but see, they don't want to hear that people don't want it, because then they would have to acknowledge they don't want it. If they don't ask you, then they can just pretend like you want it and force it on you anyway. I know when I first moved down here, I was staying with several grad students who were all excited because they were in a project through the college campus here where they installed a smart meter and they put the smart thermostat on their wall, and when you walk by it, it comes on. So it obviously has some kind of sensor in there, so it senses you being in the room, and it immediately comes on and tells you what the temperature is, and I've seen it, like, when I was living there, I saw it move based on me being in the room, like, oh, you came in the room, we're going to change the temperature. I didn't do that. Something else programmed did that, and it was one of the first things that my roommates showed me when they were like, this is so cool. I can control the temperature in my house from anywhere where I have an internet connection, and my first thought was, and so can the other people on the end of this smart thing you have in your wall. They can control it too. I mean, where do you think this is headed? Are we headed to a time where we're going to have these entities be able to say, oh, you know, I don't think anybody needs air conditioning this summer. Let's just make sure everyone's thermostat is permanently set to 80, and we'll just conserve energy.
Exactly. It's really downright creepy. So many people who, you know, completely dismiss the idea that anything wireless could ever hurt you. They go down that. Many of them are like, but I really care about my privacy and this sort of stuff. If that can sense, it can create a log record, and that log record can go back out to the smart meter. That smart meter can communicate with the other antenna, which communicates directly to the grid, and that log record can be going back anywhere else. They can program it to do anything, and because it's wireless, they can do software upgrades from remotely, from anywhere, to say, oh, you know what, I'm going to start monitoring that smart meter instead of 15-minute increments. I can monitor it every 5 minutes or every 1 minute or online directly, like
continuously.
Streaming, right. Not to mention that they also put hardware pieces into the meters where they can shut off your power. They say the excuse here in Naperville is, well, we'll do that so that we don't have to send anybody out if you decide to move and want your power shut off, or if you're a deadbeat ratepayer and you haven't paid your bill. So, okay, well, that's all well and good, except that you can also buy the software that's continuously monitoring people, so that in the event that you use a little too much power, say it's a hot summer day and your air conditioning's going and you have all your doors and windows open and the dishwasher is going and the pool heater is going, you just exceeded the threshold, the limit that they have set, whatever somebody to set somewhere.
Which they will.
And then it pops over that, and automatically the system, nobody even has to be paying attention. The system will just send a message and tell that connection to pop open, and now you have no power for a minimum of 15 minutes, which is the standard. And the city of Naperville, and I can practically guarantee you that everyone, this is an optional piece of hardware, and the city of Naperville said that they wanted to buy it. And they say, oh, no, we can't do it. We can't do that. And their own people within the utility who were aware of the capabilities of the technology said, oh, yeah, it can do that. And they said, oh, well, we promise that we won't do that.
Oh, sure, we promise we won't.
Your promise is as good as this piece of paper that you write.
Exactly.
City officials can come forward and go, well, we think that it's just the right thing to do for the green movement, that we must conserve energy, so you're going to have to do it by law. Or who knows, down the road, Department of Energy may say, and you know, the federal government, the executive branch may make a new order that says you have to do this. I believe in conservation. You know, we are do not waste family. That's my family's choice. And people should not be forced out of their comfort zone, especially the elderly, people that have sick and infirm. I mean, and with these meters going on, that number is going to go up.
Oh, of course.
You know, people should not be forced down into that realm of
well, people should have freedom. I mean, this is supposed to be America. We're supposed to have freedom. Exactly. And I think it's just amazing how they continuously, they roll out this kind of technology and they say, oh, this is trendy, it's new, it's going to be so helpful for you for XYZ reasons, and then they find a way to turn it around and use it against us.
Right, it's exciting, and it's been marketed as such. It's new and exciting. I have literature from the city that says it's new and exciting upgrade to the Smart Grid Initiative, and I think that's why Naperville was listed as a case study. If you look at whitehouse.gov and you search for the 21st century Smart Grid, about what grade, it's like a, I don't know, 100-page document or something, and you find Naperville in there, and it says Naperville is a case study, and it makes perfect sense. We are an island amongst all of this is the area of Commonwealth Edison. ComEd pretty much runs the power for the rest of the Chicagoland area, and we're this little island. And honestly, our power is extremely reliable right here. Since the 90s, they've been burying the power lines and the cable underground. So we have very few overhead power lines, which is both aesthetically pleasing, but it also makes it very reliable. We rarely have a power outage here. And when the wind blows, and next door in Wheaton, those poor people are out for 14 days. It's insane. They all have power generators for blocks in an area.
Well,
and this, I mean, the city said their whole goal was to try and make things more reliable, and they already do that.
Well, it's nice that they call you a case study. I think I'm going to go ahead and speculate that part of the reason they also decided to choose a town in Illinois is just because the state has some of the harshest eavesdropping laws in the country, and they know that if people try to resist this, and they can send the cops in, and they can say you can't even film, we'll just arrest you. It's amazing. Well, how can people get involved with your organization? Because you need to have like a march, a protest, hold up some banners. I mean, we need to get people down here getting involved in this, because this is insane.
Well, we've had a rally in the past, and we're definitely not opposed to doing that again. We have an opportunity with our election coming up here just within our city, because we do have a city council that can really make changes happen here. And our organization is napervillesmartmeterawareness.org, and we're a nonprofit, and we're just an advocacy group, and we're educating the residents and everybody in Illinois and across the country. We work with the other smart meter awareness groups to help each other. So that's one of the ways that everybody can help is log on, take a look, and there's a donate page on there.
Gotcha. Well, thanks for taking up your time. I see your little one there. I just want to say it's really good what you're doing, and keep up the good fight. Keep standing up for your rights.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Definitely. Take care.
Thank you.
And we need more people like Jennifer to actually speak out and stand up for their rights. I mean, the Supreme Court did rule that it is not unconstitutional to film police, that it's actually unconstitutional to have laws saying you can't film the police, that it's a violation of people's First Amendment rights. So we need more people to stand up against this. They cannot force us to bathe ourselves in radiation. I mean, this is just insane. And if you want to look more into the dark agenda behind all this smart grid stuff, you need to go to Infowars shop and get Behind the Green Mask, UN Agenda 21. And it talks about how they want to track, trace, and control everybody through these smart grids. That's the whole point, ultimately. And if you get cancer along the way, well, they're not too concerned about that, actually, either. So, also, if you like the news that we're bringing you, which you heard Jennifer, she said that national media outlets aren't talking about this, but we are going to continue to do that. You need to subscribe at prisonplanet.tv. We have a one-year special right now for $39.95 that gets 11 people access to all of our news, our special reports, and our books and videos. So everybody needs to go to prisonplanet.tv. And that's it for tonight's Infowars Nightly News. I've been your host, Melissa Melton, at this interview, and we'll see you again tomorrow at 7 p.m. Central.